Hello, everybody. Power here. Hope you're all having a nice day, and we are back with some more Chilling Reign content. This time, I'm going to be looking at the budget decks from the next set. So, the reason behind this video was that Chilling Reign is looking pretty pricey, and although there's a lot of playable VMAXs that I think will definitely shake up the format a little bit, I'm also under the true awareness that true awareness, yeah, that's not a phrase. The sure awareness that VMAXs are not that cheap, and people could do with cheap decks basically. So we're going to take a look at some of the affordable decks coming out in Chilling Reign. Yeah, very messy intro. Sorry about that. But the first one that I really wanted to showcase was Castform. Now I know to a lot of people, Castform looked very underwhelming at first, but the more I thought about it, the more Castform as a deck actually does make sense, and it can work. So this is a pretty good starting list. So for those of you who don't know, for Castform, in order to work, it's very similar to how the Rotoms worked in the early Sun and Moon era, and that is that you have to have 8 stadiums in your discard pile in order for their attacks to work for free. So the attacks are fairly mediocre, but they can be used for free if you get 8 stadiums in the discard pile. So for stadium choice, we have 4 of the Old Cemetery that reads once during a turn, whenever your opponent attaches an energy that's not a psychic energy, then they will take 2 damage counters, or it's to a psychic Pokemon. I think it's psychic energy to psychic Pokemon. Could be wrong about that. 4 Tower of Darkness, that essentially says once your turn you may discard a single strike card from your hand. So I'm presuming this person is using Tower of Darkness to discard other Towers of Darkness, which is fair enough. 4 Dojo, which is crucial, I'll explain that in a minute. And 3 Rose Tower, which is essentially allowing you to draw extra cards if your hand size gets really low. So what do the cast forms actually do? Well, the Sunny cast form we see in the top left-hand corner is doing 150 damage, but you have to discard one of your stadiums in play anyway to use it. Well, that's fine, because more stadiums in the discard pile, the better. But anyway, 150, a little bit mediocre, but the dojo, like, this is where the dojo comes in clutch, because obviously, if you're behind on prize cards, dojo will activate. You have a fighting energy on that Sunny cast form. 150 becomes 190. That's 1 at curing Crobat, and it's 2 at curing a vast majority of VMAXs, which is great. Every VMAX, not vast majority, sorry. And then the one below it, the Ice one, is doing 120, and then you can't use that attack next turn, no problem. These guys have free retreat, which is great. So 120 becomes 160 with the dojo. Great stuff. It means we can 2-hit kill VMAXs, and also 1-hit kill Sandy Scorch, definitely worth noting. And then the Ice one, or the Water one, sorry, which we play 2 of, does 20 damage spread, and then obviously that can be increased with Telescopic Sight. So pretty interesting deck. It's also playing 1 Mew for bench barrier, because you do need that against Urshifu for sure. 2 Dedenne, just to discard a bunch of stadium cards from your hand, hopefully. And then the Articuno that reads, once in your turn, you may discard 2 cards from your hand and draw 1 extra card. So great for just discarding those stadiums. Pretty simple deck. You can quite easily rack up damage thanks to Old Cemetery and Dojo and the spreader guy. So question is, though, can you take 6 prizes in the game before the opponent does? Because you are very flimsy, I should say. So yeah, pretty weak guy, but he does have some pretty cool attacks, so that's probably do it for the cast form. One thing to note is that this list is also playing 4 of the Clay supporter, which reads, reveal the top 7 cards of your deck, and you can put all the item cards you find there into your hand, and then just discard everything else. This deck is playing a lot of items which you'll need to set up properly, such as Ordinary Rod to find and recover cast forms, Level Ball to search them out, but at the same time, you can use this to discard excess Pokemon you don't need, as well as stadiums. So, pretty interesting deck. Moving on here, we have Gengar Whistling. This is not my kind of deck personally, but I can see why this would be played, I guess. It's probably a bit of a slower deck. I think looking at it again, you have to play this deck pretty slowly, almost like a control deck in how you play. But basically, the whole concept is you're using Gengar's Pain Burst attack, which does 10 damage, and then 40 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So really strong finishing move, but very low base damage, You're only doing 10 damage. And that's where the Wheezing Roxy combo comes in. So Roxy, discard 2 Pokemon from your hand, draw 3 cards for each one you discard. Wheezing, allowing you to spread a damage counter for every Weezing you discarded in this way, so you can just spread 20 damage, and then of course that's going to rack up pretty quickly. No Lieutenant Surge, which is interesting, but then I don't think... Well, no, they should have Lieutenant Surge in their format, but maybe there's just no deck space. But this list is also playing Welder to pay that high attack cost on Gengar, which is why I don't think the deck will be that competitive at all. But it can at least stall for some time. It's also worth noting that this list is also playing 2 copies of Calyrex V in the top right corner, which is really interesting, and that has an attack that lets you spread 5 damage counters to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. This is obviously going to set your opponent up perfectly for Gengar. And there's also a Talonflame V to act as extra draw support because the list is already clunked up with Red Candies and Welders, so fairly clunky deck, and you're supposed to play it pretty slowly, I would say. Either way, I think this is the best place to start with Gengar, and I think it would definitely be interesting to see how well this would do against someone like Urshifu, for example. So, moving on to probably my favorite deck of the set so far is definitely Malamar. So, Malamar for single Psychic Energy lets you reveal as many Rapid Strike cards as you want from your hand and shuffle them back into your deck, so reducing your hand size. And you're doing 40 damage for each one you reveal. So, the reason why I like this a lot is because, one, you're Psychic type, so you have access to the new Fog Crystal. You're hitting weakness on Urshifu, which is one of the best decks in the format. And it's for a single Psychic Energy, and it means that you can play as many of the Rapid Strike support cards as you want, e.g. Karina's Focus, e.g. Tower of Water for free retreat, e.g. the new Spiral Energy. That's going to be providing you with a 1 Aurora attachment, but can be used to shovel it back in. So I think it's honestly a pretty good card. It's just not on many people's radar because shuffling back in cards isn't what people want to do. But I do think this has some future. I do think it's automatically better than the Galarian Mr. Rhyme Corgi Ball deck where you discard the Pokeballs. I do think it's a lot better than that card, so who knows? I think this has potential though, especially with Octillery allowing you to search your deck for any Rapid Strike Pokemon. Or Rapid Strike cards, sorry. And then of course Karina to allow you to rebuild your hand size, so pretty cool. Briefly go over this Malamar variant. This one is playing an Inteleon line. Just worth noting that because Inteleon has the ability Shady Dealings, so when it evolves up, it can search your deck for any 2 trainer cards. Just really good for keeping the chain going. And then, of course, this list is also playing the Rapid Strike versions of Sobble, and I think it plays 1 Rapid Strike Inteleon just behind the Shady Dealings one. So you can just shuffle in any excess Inteleon you don't need. It's also worth noting there's a really cool combo here with Scoop Up Net. So you can Scoop Up Net the Inteleon that you've already used, and then just shuffle them back in if you don't need to use them, or bench them again and evolve them up. There's a lot of interesting combos you can do with that, so pretty solid deck. It's also playing 3 Erica, which I find interesting. Just being able to draw cards until you have 6 in your hand until you have for each card on your opponent's side of the field, I think it's pretty good. So yeah, should be pretty good. So Decidueye barely made the list, but I thought it was worth including because it gained a new stadium card, Path to the Peak. Path to the Peak is essentially one of the best stadium cards in the format for sure, as soon as this set drops. It basically shuts off all the opponent's rule box abilities, so Calyrex, Eternatus, Dedenne, Crobat, no abilities. And the reason why this is important for Decidueye is because Decidueye really needs those early turns to get at least 2 or 3 Rowlets into play, and then evolves up into Decidueye. But until that point, the opponent can just go really turbo and start playing Dedennes, Crobats, Researchers, trying to find cards that let them just knock out Rowlets as quickly as possible. Path to the Peak really does slow them down. I think that's why it's important. So moving on, I think this should be, the second last deck list is Seviper Houndoom. So I really like Seviper. I think it could be one of the best single prize decks in the format, potentially. But it does have a very low 110 HP, so spread decks, especially post-rotation, will really hurt this deck. Hopefully it can survive. But what does Seviper do? Well, it does 90 damage for 3 energy, and then 90 more if you played a single strike supporter card. So Bruno is obviously perfect with this deck because they're flimsy, they got knocked out, you can play a Bruno. And then of course you got Karen for that extra plus 20 damage for every prize card your opponent's taken. So really strong attacker. This deck is also favored in that Seviper is hitting weakness on Calyrex, and Stonejourner is hitting weakness on Pikarom, which just doesn't seem to want to die anymore. So Stonejourner for Pikarom, Seviper for Calyrex, and Seviper for Zacian as well, because you can get there with Karen and Single Strike Energy. Also, it's worth noting that this list plays 2 Great Catcher, which I'm pretty sure is important because you don't want to be playing Boss's Order at all, because you have to be playing the Single Strike supporters nearly every turn. But then, of course, you can use Great Catcher for Pikarom, Mew Mew, Dedenne. And then, of course, we have the 3 lanterns in the bottom corner there, which allow you to pick up a Karen or a Bruno. So, yeah, seems really solid. I think this deck, apart from the Urshifu matchup, which I think is really bad, I would say this deck has a lot of favorable matchups. And it would be interesting to see if this can make any splashes and, maybe even get to that top 8 position. A bit like how Excadrill and Spiritomb did take a while to get going, but I think this does have some really solid potential. So I'm pretty sure. Oh wait, no, there's 2 more lists. Gosh, so disorganized this morning. But basically, Golurk, Golbat. So what does Golurk do? For those of you who need a recap, because this card came out in, I think it was Cosmic Eclipse, nearly a year ago. Golurk essentially does 160 for 2 Colorless Energy, which is great because it means you can use Twin Energy or Triple Acceleration Energy. So it does 160, really swag. But the 160 can only be done if you have no supporters in your discard pile. So this deck plays no supporters whatsoever. It just plays Golurk. Just plays items, sorry, I should have said there. But you can play this new Golbat engine, which is from Battle Styles. So I agree this deck is maybe a little bit old, but I thought it was worth pointing out because Psychic types, they are on the rise. We do need them because Urshifu is very oppressive right now. And I thought this one was interesting. Like, no one really seems to talk about Golurk, so 160, 320 on Urshifu, worth talking about. Should probably mention what Crobat and Golbat do. Golbat allows you to draw 2 cards when you evolve it up, and Crobat allows you to draw 3. So it's really that extra draw support that you need for the most part from these 2 guys. So this deck, you can actually build most of this strange deck right now, except 1 key piece, which is the old cemetery, which we discussed earlier, which essentially says whenever you attach a psychic energy to a non-psychic Pokemon, you put 2 damage counters on it. Well, what if I told you there was a deck that really wanted to do that to itself? Yeah, very strange concept. And that is Runerigus, Charim, Rapidash. Probably the strangest deck, one of the strangest decks I've ever covered on the channel. Basically, Runerigus has an attack for 2 colorless energy that says, for every single damage counter on Runerigus, put 2 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. So assuming we have a Cemetery in play and 2 grass energy on Runerigus, well, that's 8 damage counters. That's 80 damage spread, which I still think is pretty impressive. And of course, there is the Rapidash that for 2 colorless energy is going to reduce someone's HP down to 100, which I think is really impressive. So easy combo, easy to pull off, pretty easy to achieve. So I think this should be a pretty cool deck. I'll have to see if it makes a splash. I mean, it might not end up being that competitive, but just have to wait and see. But huge thanks for watching. Let me know down below what's your favorite budget deck. Chilling Reign comes out later on this week, I would have thought, or the week after, but coming out soon. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you.